Hi, welcome back to Viola Extravaganza. My name is Rachel Miner. I'm a fourth year viola major and Hispanic Studies major at Pepperdine University.
Hi, my name is Anna Mock. I am a first year master's student at the University of Denver, where I study viola performance and music theory pedagogy with Basil Andreas. And would our guest, Mark Holloway, like to introduce himself?
Sure. I'm Mark Holloway. I'm a violist. I am a professor of viola and chamber music at the Jacobs School of Music in Bloomington, Indiana University, and I'm violist of the Pacifica Quartet.
Nice.
Happy to be with you today.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us today.
Pleasure.
So, just to start, how did you start on viola?
I started in public school. I'm from Long Island, New York, and we had a great public school system where you had music, art, and gym sort of on alternating days, and you could choose an instrument. I chose viola. I think I knew what it was because we had had sort of general music classes, and I liked the way the name sounded compared to violin. Thought it was more interesting. I knew that it was maybe in the middle, or it wasn't the superstar all the time. It was the team player, maybe. It appealed to me that no one really chose that as much as the violin. So yeah, that's why I chose viola. I had really dedicated, caring local teachers in the schools. I had a great middle school teacher also who sort of really made me and my parents realize um, that maybe I had talent and it could, end up in a scholarship or something like this.
Yeah.
And it's great because years later I got to sort of re-meet these teachers of mine and maybe they got to see some of my success or something. Um, so it's really lovely. I had a wonderful high school music teacher also. My elementary school teacher was my first teacher, so yeah, I had a really good support community of great teachers.
That's so important. Oh my gosh. And so in that case, when and how did you decide to pursue music?
Well, I always loved it. I used to just put headphones on in my room and put on a CD of some music, whether it was a symphony or something. And if I could find the music even better, I'd play along with it, or maybe I would just make up viola parts to it.
Mhm.
I was never pushed. My parents never pushed me. I practiced a little bit just because I enjoyed it. No one ever made me practice. I wish some people had made me practice a little more, maybe. Uh, and I always loved it. It was just always fun, and I always really enjoyed it. It was never pushed on me, which I'm really grateful for because I know a lot of people. Someone pushes them to do it, they don't really love it, and then they're unhappy with it. Whereas I loved it, was sort of blissfully ignorant, and I was walking by the payphone in my high school one day on the way to orchestra, and a friend of mine was on the phone making an audition for Tanglewood. I'd never heard of Tanglewood, pretty sure. And he said, "Mark, come here." And so he just handed me the phone and said, "Do you have any spots open for viola?" And so I set up an audition right then. It's
Oh,
crazy. I think I was 17, and I went to Tanglewood. I got in, and that was the summer that totally changed my life. I especially made me focus towards chamber music. The first week I was there, I heard all these amazing concerts, and the first piece I really remember was Brahms' Piano Quintet. There was a student group that was playing it, and it just starts such an evocative way, and was so drawn in. I had maybe heard it before, but never live. I didn't hear a lot of concerts,
mhm.
and I really, that was a real turning point that I realized I wanted to do that the rest of my life. Also, the principal violist there, Steve Ansell, um, he played sort of at the welcoming concert. He played this late Liszt piece for viola and piano, and I loved his sound. I just never heard a violist really before. Um, the Juilliard Quartet played their last concert there with Robert Mann as first violinist. I heard that. I heard Yo-Yo play all the six Bach suites. The Guarnieri Quartet played that summer. My first string quartets that I played were there, and and it was Shostakovich number 8 and Ravel. You can imagine two great quartets.
Oh my
I
gosh.
met the person who would become my undergrad teacher, Michelle, of course. She was teaching viola there, and a lot of Boston people were teaching there, and that sort of made me want to go to BU. Another thing was we had so I'm from Long Island, and there was uh, like a like an all county music program there, an all island program. You took an audition, they picked the best people, let's say, and then they put you together for a week of work, and you played some concerts. And after my audition, the woman who was on the jury said, I'm a cellist, and my husband is a violist. He's in the New York Philharmonic, and my son is a violinist, and our friend is a violinist, and we get together and we read chamber music, and you should come over because we lived kind of near each other. And so I did. And every Friday night we would read string quartets and quintets and trios and duos, and we'd have food, and it was just a lot of fun, and I really learned a lot about the repertoire. I learned about sight reading. Um, I learned how to listen, hopefully, and to play chamber music with others, and just to love that music. So those two things, playing chamber music with friends and going to Tanglewood, really opened my eyes and told me that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
I'm hoping to have a big chamber music party as soon as this pandemic's over.
Oh, I know. And as you get older, you get busy, and you don't have the time. But when I was young, I used to always read chamber music with friends. It was so much fun. So hopefully we can get back to that after the pandemic.
Did you consider pursuing other careers, or were you pretty set on I want to do music after?
Yeah, I didn't really think about doing something else. And it wasn't like, I mean, my parents thought maybe I should double major or minor in music ed, or maybe major in music, something like this, just so that if in case performing didn't work out, I'd have some sort of backup. But I really wanted to study performance. I love teaching, but I didn't want to get an education degree per se. I just wanted to play. And so they were very, they didn't make me do that, which I'm very grateful for. And so besides that, no. I mean, I have so many other loves. In fact, maybe they distracted me a lot when I was your age. I should have been practicing more. But no, I never considered doing anything else.
What are those other loves?
I was about to ask that. Are they like hobbies?
Yeah, I suppose, but French would be the first thing that comes to mind. I always loved French. I wanted to speak it. It was just so natural that I would just learn French. Sometimes I thought I was born, French in a different life or something. And so I always wanted to learn that, and I did study it. I had great teachers from middle school, high school, college. I took AP French, and then in college, French Lit and French grammar classes and all kinds of things like that. So that always really interested me. Luckily I've got to play in France. I have a lot of French friends, and that's been very enriching, fulfilling. I love wine. It's one of my big passions. I love reading about it. I love listening to podcasts about it and reading blogs and drinking it and tasting it and comparing it and matching it with food. That's a big passion. Hearing the stories about where it's from, because wine is from a certain place on the earth, hopefully, if it's made well. It's almost like traveling there. You get a sense, is it near the sea? Is the sun shining a lot? Is it rainy weather? Is it rich soil? Is it chalky soil? You taste this in the wine. And so it's almost like traveling. That's really nice. And cooking, food. I like food. And I mean, I'm a good cook, but I'm not a chef at all. So, I couldn't have done that. But something in French. But the thing is, if you speak another language, you can do anything you can do in one place, you can do in a place where they understand that language, hopefully. I mean, that's
French still pretty good?
Say it again?
Is your French still pretty good?
Yeah, I try to keep it up. I talk with friends. I listen to the news in French sometimes, and sometimes I'll read articles on the internet in French. And yeah, I love it. It's great. Unfortunately I don't get to speak it that much, especially now in the pandemic. But I try to go there once a year. Good. And yeah, it's nervous. Always makes me a little nervous, especially numbers. Speaking on the phone is very difficult in a different language. But yeah, I'm pretty fluent. I mean, if I never lived there, but I spent a couple weeks there. Sort of, I used to go to a festival 5 or 6 times, let's say, and that would be for 2 weeks, and then I would go on vacation for a week, let's say.
After my junior year, you might remember this, I studied music theory actually in Paris.
I remember, yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And I noticed that the music scene there was actually, it felt so different than in the United States.
Yeah, it's very different, that's true. What did you find? What was different about it?
Well, I was there during the Manifest Academy, which is their big new music festival. And contrary to the United States, where a select number of people will come to new music concerts, the audiences were almost full packed. And and I get the impression there that new music for them is like reading the New York Times bestseller. Just like, what's happening in the music scene nowadays?
I think that's a fair point. The French have always such a rich society of debate and expositions and critique and criticism, and so I think and also new music, right? I mean, one of the most famous teachers taught at Fontainebleau, Nadia Boulanger and Pierre Boulez, right? Founded IRCAM, the contemporary music there, and or sorry, do I have that wrong? Yokam or Ensemble Intercontemporain, one of the two, but they were linked, right? And
Yeah.
so yeah, there's always been a rich tradition of that. That's true. I
Right.
suppose if you went to one of the major music centers in the States, like New York or well, the many musical centers, you'd find nice audiences for new music too. I think.
Definitely in LA. I mean, there's the great thing about LA is that there's pretty much a new music piece on every concert.
That is great.
So instead of having just an entire new music concert, it's kind of being like enveloped in the rest of the repertoire, which I kind of really appreciate.
That's great. I mean, the great performers of the past played new music because now it's old music to us, but to them it was music of their day, and that was standard. And I think we've gotten away from that. But it seems like recently it's becoming more popular, and especially now that we're examining music by women, by composers of color. I think as we should be. It's long overdue. Now there's a really good opportunity to explore new music, also. I think, and music from the past from those people too.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think people are with everything that's been going on. I think people have a more open mind, hopefully, or their minds are being opened, and our minds are being opened. So I think we have a lot to learn ourselves.
Speaking of the women composers, what inspired that season's concert where you did the featuring women composers?
Yeah, well, we're always looking for anniversaries of composers or of events or something. Sometimes we just play concerts with music that we think goes nicely together, just sonically. But sometimes there's a theme. Presenters like that too. Um, it might be a starry night, let's say, and then you find music that would fit into that theme. Well, with this, it was an important anniversary. This centenary of the 19th Amendment. Giving women the right to vote. So we thought, wow, that's such a nice thing to celebrate. So it just sort of really nicely coincided with people's awareness, better awareness of the past. And we thought, oh, it's a really nice time to do this program. Amy Beach, Jennifer Higdon, Shulamit Duran, who's we've been playing, Fanny Mendelssohn, was another piece in the program. Ruth Crawford Seeger, total masterpiece, that piece.
Yeah.
Yeah. Florence Price, who played a movement of one of her quartets. I think we're going to play the whole thing coming up, actually.
It's been really fun to see a lot of people playing Florence Price recently.
Yeah, it's beautiful music, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Very, very heartfelt too, and it sort of rings really nicely.
Definitely.
I have to get to know her music better. I don't know her second quartet, so I want to get to know that. And the 5 pieces, is it Studies in Counterpoint or in Folksong? I forget the title. I've heard excerpts, and sounds like really good music, fun, and audiences would like it. I'm sure it'd be nice as an encore even.
I remember actually one of my favorite concerts that I attended from the Pacifica Quartet was when you all played Shulamit Ram's Quartet Number 3. And I'm wondering, how did you build that working relationship with Shulamit Ram?
That piece was written before my time in the quartet, not too long ago, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. But they knew her from the University of Chicago. And so they had a long relationship there because the quartet was there and she's been teaching there since the 70s. So they became friends, and they asked her to write this piece. And I think at the time my quartet was in residence at the Metropolitan Museum in New York, and they were surrounded by art and thinking about how it might be nice to sort of link music and art together. So they asked her to write this piece, maybe based on some sort of art. And around then, there was some exhibition at the Met called Glitter and Doom, and it was about this juxtaposition of art in between the wars, I think it was, or maybe during the war, I'm not sure. And she was inspired by this painter named Felix Nussbaum, who perished in Auschwitz very young. Very fine painter. Some of the paintings really speak to today. If I encourage you to Google them. She wrote this piece, and it was. I think she wanted to talk about the sweet normalcy of life that gets ruptured and destroyed, and by cruelty, and how a normal quote unquote life can be uprooted and destroyed, or which also seems to have such resonance today. It's a piece I'm quite fond of. We really enjoy playing it, if enjoy is the right word. It's very powerful. It's the kind of piece that audiences don't just start clapping right away when it's over. I think it washes over them and it sort of sinks in, as it does to us too. It feels very different from performance to performance. There's some things that are improvised, let's say, in the piece, and so it feels very different from performance to performance. It's great. It's a piece that we recorded recently. It's on our last CD. Yeah, and with other composers, yeah, we premiered a piece by David Zube, who's on the faculty here at IU. Um, I think we're in talks with Claude Baker to perhaps work on a new piece of his that he's going to write. The quartet has worked with Jennifer Higdon. She wrote a piece for the quartet years ago, which we've been playing again. I knew her from Philly. I also knew Shulamit from New York a little bit. I played a piece of hers there, like sort of a chamber violin concerto. Um, so
Oh,
I met her before. I forget the name. Is it called Yearning? Maybe I'm trying to remember the name. And also with the Portland Symphony in Maine, I once played a piece of hers too, a symphonic piece. We recorded the saxophone quintet by Ellen Taves Willick with our colleague Otis Murphy from IU. The quartet got to work with her then at the time. We're going to premiere a piece by Joseph Schwantner with guitar. Ben Shirley is coming up, and a piece by James Lee III. Another piece we're going to, I think, premiere soon. The quartet played commissioned a quintet by Julia Wolf. They worked with her when that
oh,
was premiered a few years ago. We played that since I've been in the quartet, but I didn't get to play it for her. But of course, my colleagues did. Anyway, those are some of the pieces. Over the 25 years or 26 years, or is it longer, of the quartet, they premiered many pieces.
So, how many pieces do you sometimes juggle with Pacifica? How many pieces are you guys maybe rehearsing at one time?
Boy, that really changes depending on things, depending on the project. Now everything is so different in the pandemic. We probably have 6, 7, 8 pieces going on right now, let's say, and most times it's a little more than that. We might have 3 or 4 programs a year, but they're not set. Meaning certain presenters might want to take out this Beethoven quartet and swap in this piece instead because so and so just played that quartet a week ago, and then it might be a special project. They want an all Shostakovich concert, let's say, or there's going to be a guest on that program, a guest pianist, a guest clarinetist, and so we play Brahms or Mozart or Schumann piano quintet or something like this. So it's a lot of repertoire, and then there are things from the past that make appearances sometimes. There are certain pieces that you can sort of refresh more quickly, and others take a lot more work. So I'd say, yeah, anywhere between 6 and 12 pieces at once, probably.
oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, it really changed.
So is there ever a time where the Pacifica Quartet will just like sit in like I don't know, like an incubation period and learn pieces together? Or is it like, do you learn the pieces in your own time and then you just come together to rehearse for a concert?
Well, I think it would be rare if we were to sort of learn it together. That would be, let's say, a last minute, you know, piece that no one has played that was just thrown on our program. That doesn't really happen. We always try to do our work at home by ourselves before we come to rehearsal. That's one of the things. That's how you sort of respect your colleagues. If you're in chamber music, if you're in orchestra, is to do your work at home so that you can get to the real meat of things in the rehearsal and not be learning your notes.
Right.
But of course, there are some pieces that are newer that we might be checking out or thinking about programming, and then we get together and we might read it together, let's say. So we haven't practiced in that case because we're just trying to get a feel for something. But in general, no, we prepare at home and then learn it, learn the quartet together, not our own parts.
Right. How much do you rehearse in a day or in a week?
Well, we rehearse usually every day during the week. If teaching is really taking up our time, if we're touring a lot of things, we might take a certain day off of the week, like Monday, to just concentrate on teaching. But otherwise, we rehearse, every day during the week. Occasionally someone will have something very important I can't get out of it, so we'll reschedule, or maybe we have a little bit of a downtime, or we might have a very busy time where we're adding rehearsals, but 3 or 4 hours a day, yeah. So it's significant, but there's so much to discuss and to talk about and to tune and to learn how to play together and things need refreshing and people make mistakes. You might have already tuned something, but I might forget, and then I'm a little flat or a little sharp, and so we have to do it again. So it's sort of endless. There's always things to discover, always more things to talk about.
That's what I love about music, is that it never ends. Like there's always something more that you can do with a piece.
That's right.
That's why playing pieces never gets old. And it's a lot of times if you come back to it later on, you have a new perspective on it, just like a lot more experience.
Right.
How do you usually structure your rehearsal time?
We don't have it sort of structured rigidly. It depends on how much time we have, how many pieces we have to learn, what we did last rehearsal. Certain movements might be much harder than others, might be twice as long. So it just depends. Someone will say, should we start with the third movement, or should we work backwards today? Or let's do Fanny Mendelssohn today, or that sort of thing. Sometimes we'll have if we're in a time crunch, let's say on Friday, we'll say, okay, what should we do on Monday? And then we'll make a little plan. It does help to focus things a little bit. I mean, I think probably the quartet, when they first started, probably had a more rigid, they would do exercises together probably and play scales and tune things like this, I imagine. But I don't, we don't do that anymore like that. We don't start with scales together. We do tune things and play things very slowly. But I think that's something when you're starting a quartet, when you're learning how to play, with a unified sound in the center of the group, that's something that's very helpful.
Definitely. So before the pandemic, of course, there's probably not much touring that's happening right now.
Right, only isolated concerts. We went to St. Paul and recorded a program there. This way, it was in their concert hall, in their space, for their subscribers. But there was no audience, just the filmmakers. We are going to play something coming up in Indianapolis with a reduced crowd size and in a big space that they've worked out all the entry and exit and the procedures and the rest periods and things like this. But we haven't done a live concert with a real audience in it was March the last time, Sarasota, Florida. March 15th or something like that.
But before the pandemic, how would you balance rehearsals and coachings and teaching and touring at the same time?
Yeah, it's a lot. That's a good question. It's a lot. We keep our rehearsal schedule. Of course, if we have to travel on a certain day, then it'll be altered. But we try to keep our rehearsal schedule, Monday to Friday, and we teach around that. So try to bring your lunch to school, so you don't have to go out and waste time finding food and things like this. And it's tough. You have to, you can't always arrive in a city early because you want to enjoy the city. Sometimes you have to arrive late at night because you've been working the whole day and you had to take a late flight. And then at the other end, you might have to leave super early to get back to teach, as opposed to enjoying Santa Fe or San Francisco or something, which I'd like to do more of. Well, it takes scheduling. It's very hard right now because we need to only teach in 50-minute increments and leave 25-minute rest periods so the room can clear. So I don't even stay in the room after I'm finished teaching. I have to leave, and so it's challenging right now. Also, everyone has to reserve a room for chamber music coachings that are too big for my studio. For example, I can't teach more than 2 students at a time here. It's a nice big studio, but it has to be enough space so that the air circulation is safe. And so that takes a lot of emailing and figuring out. But we're doing the best we can because we really believe in teaching, and we want to make sure that our students get good education, or as good an education as we can give them right now. So we've been teaching outside. We had a tent.
Oh, wow.
We were coaching underneath so that if the sun was too warm, we could take shelter under the tent. I was coaching all kinds of corners of the campus outside, and but people have been open-minded and flexible, and so we're making it work. And then of course we have big rooms on campus, like big orchestra rehearsal rooms and things, which when you're if I'm coaching a quartet, there's lots of room for them to spread out and be masked, of course.
But I think thinking about the pandemic, it reminded me like how much I appreciate music, because of course it's easy to complain like, oh, I have to go to this rehearsal and that rehearsal and whatever. But when that all like gets stripped away, you're like, oh, wait, this is actually like what I want to do.
That's right.
Yeah, no, it was very much the same for me, because just before the pandemic hit, I was absolutely swamped with the opera. And I was like, oh, I'm so tired, like, got to go to opera now.
Which opera were you playing?
We did a double bill of Dido and Aeneas and Gianni Schicchi.
Oh, great.
Which, that was very fun. It wasn't even that I didn't enjoy playing that. Gianni Schicchi is probably my favorite opera I've played so far.
Okay, well, they're very different, right? Dido and...
Oh, yeah, completely different. But I had so much fun in the Puccini. But, when you're just that swamped with everything. But then it was so shortly after that, it just all ended. And all we could do is play solo viola.
Yeah, it was very rapid, wasn't it? It was kind of shocking.
So we were kind of wondering, how would you describe the personality of the Pacifica Quartet? Like, are you guys friends? And like, what's the culture of the group? And how do you determine in general if a chamber group has chemistry?
Yeah, we're friends. I like them very much, and more importantly, I respect them. very much as people, but as musicians. I think that a lot of it's difficult to be in a relationship, so to speak, with a string quartet when you're a member of it because you spend a lot of time together, and you want to make sure that if you get upset or frustrated or if you're having a bad day, let's say before you even got to rehearsal, that it doesn't affect your relationship with your colleagues because the music is so much more important than any small little quarrel about a bowing or about a tempo. We're so lucky to do what we do that it's always important to keep that in mind. And Samin, my colleague, said something once at a talk back to an audience or something that at the end of the rehearsal you just let it go. I like these people. I respect them. I respect their playing. I'm lucky to do what I'm doing. If there's any tension, to let it out, to not come back. It's easy to say. It's difficult. I'm sure you've had issues with friends or partners or chamber music partners. So we're human. But the most important thing is to respect each other, and I do respect them. They're marvelous musicians, instrumentalists too. And the music we play, we're so lucky. We get to, if you're a scholar of painting, if you want to see this late Rembrandt self-portrait, you have to go to the Frick collection. That's where it is. You can see pictures of it, but the real thing is there. You have to go there to see it.
Yeah.
Us, we hold up a Beethoven score, but to bring it to life, we have to play it, and we get to put our hands in this every day, so to speak. It's a real luxury. It's also a burden.
Mhm.
When you're every day dealing with something that's so much greater than you are, it's humbling.
I was just gonna say, I know it's always a concern of mine. I'm like, am I doing this piece justice? Like, is this living up to what it needs to be? It's
Yeah,
always
don't be too hard on yourself, but at the same time, it's good to ask those questions. But at the same time, I mean, I get stressed and nervous and anxious about concerts sometimes. I should tell myself this, but lucky me that I'm not a pediatric cardiologist or something. Where it's really life and death. You can really, I mean, we can change people's lives hopefully, but it's different. If I miss a shift or something, it's not the end of the world. So I
Right.
try to tell myself that. You asked about the culture of the group. Yeah, I think we try to listen to each other. I try to listen to them. Um, Chamber music is really about listening. I think that's what I try to instill in my students. It's taking the ego out of it and putting that in a whole group, being a team player, bringing the music to life and not inserting yourself in it. Hopefully,
Right. It's all about like compromising too.
there's a lot of compromising. Mhm. And you have to put yourself in someone else's shoes, just as you should in life. I think we can become better people when we, listen to others and compromise and try to meet in the middle, in a sense, to try to understand where someone's coming from. I think that's also applicable in music too. I think my colleagues and I hopefully are intense, passionate advocates for music and its power and its scope. And I think now we really need it, especially after this year or after these last couple of years.
Mhm. How is coaching different than teaching a private lesson?
It's a very interesting question. My private students, I have a real one-on-one relationship with, and as their teacher, it's my job to really get a whole picture of them and their playing. Um, I have to make sure I'm not overlooking something. Let's say their intonation or their vibrato or their posture or their rhythm. Also, as a teacher, I care about all my students, but I have to make sure my students are doing okay. That there's no signals I'm missing about if they're unhappy about something or if they're going through a tough period or if there's some outside thing. I want to be a mentor. I want to be a person who listens to them, a positive figure, hopefully. So that's important to me with a private student. And you have to also think about their sort of their track, their career path. What they're interested in, what kind of goals they have, what's reasonable, what kind of expectations to have, perhaps, um, and to prepare them for those auditions or for if it's for an orchestra or for another college or want to be a music teacher or a private teacher or soloist or whatever. So it's a part viola professor, part psychologist, perhaps. And with coaching, of course, I'm always also trying to listen to my students and hope that they're doing well and things. But I might mention someone's vibrato at a certain passage, like, oh, maybe you should vibrate more narrowly there. It's more intense. It's more, or whatever. But I wouldn't talk to them about about the shape of their hand so much. I would leave that to their private teacher. I don't want to step on someone's the work they're trying to do with a student. It's not my place to talk about their posture per se, or how they should hold their violin. So that's a difference. I don't want to intrude on a colleague's the work they're trying to do with a student. Whereas coaching, I'm trying to teach them how to listen to each other, how to communicate, and how to delve into this particular piece that we're working on also, and how to read a score. So it's different from lessons. I mean, of course, I'm trying to teach those things too. But coaching has goals. There's a goal to learn a certain piece, to learn a certain style, to learn how to play with a clarinetist, how to play with a pianist, how to play with a singer, how to play with a cellist.
Did you do much coaching / teaching before you came to Indiana?
Yeah, nothing like what I'm doing now. But yeah, through the Chamber Music Society of Lincoln Center, I would do a lot of school concerts. It's not exactly teaching like this, but I would do some teaching there. I would coach ensembles. I'd even play with young ensembles in middle school and high school sometimes. So that was kind of a regular thing. And at festivals, I would teach a lot too. San Diego and mainly Mozart, I would work with students. A festival in Switzerland, I would go with, or I would go to. I'd work with students there too. And I taught some lessons over the years and gave some master classes. And um, so, yeah, I mean, I did sort of a lot of teaching, but on paper, it didn't look like much, perhaps. Now I'm teaching quite a bit. Lots of coachings, lots of lessons, lots of master classes when we travel, especially. Um, so I feel like I've gotten a lot better at it in the last 2 or 3 years. It's exciting. I'm learning so much. I learned so much about my own playing, about how to teach myself from hearing you guys play and hearing talented students. It's been very helpful. Also, it inspires me to practice and to learn the pieces I'm teaching better. And yeah, because I remember what it was like to have teachers demonstrating, and it's very exciting. So yeah.
Do you have a favorite aspect of music? Like, do you like performing with your quartet most, or versus coaching or teaching or other types of performances? Like, do you have a favorite?
No, I can't say I have a favorite. I mean, um, I love teaching. I love performing with my quartet. I love performing. Um, I think it's very natural to have sort of ups and downs, so to speak, where you prefer this a little more sometime than this, and where you feel more comfortable some places and more nervous in other places, or more at home in a certain kind of theater or stage or concert hall than a different kind. Um, I can't say I prefer one or the other. That's one thing that was so nice about being a violist and being a freelancer for so long, was that you're like a chameleon. You're always sort of adapting to the situation that you're in, and that the variety of it all, the diversity is really exciting. Um, I used to play lots of different kinds of music when I was a freelance chamber musician, orchestral player, occasional recitals, things like this.
I would say like all those facets of music complement each other very well.
Mhm.
Because I know for me, if I focus too much on like one asset of music, like only doing orchestra, only playing solo music,
Mm.
not that I get tired of it, but it becomes a little predictable.
Mm.
And also, like being able to do chamber music and orchestra and teaching just adds a lot of variety. And also, they all inform each other as well.
Yeah, predictable is a bad word when it comes to music, I think.
Yeah, definitely. So you mentioned performing and freelancing in New York City. How did you get to play with the Chamber Music Society of Lincoln Center?
That was an audition process. I'd heard about it. Of course, I knew the Chamber Music Society as just a concert goer when I lived in New York. I'm from New York. Um, they had an audition. It used to be called CMS2. Now it's called the Bowers Program. And you had to audition with, I think, different periods of repertoire. Well, first you had to sort of pass a video round. Uh, so I auditioned. I sent in the video and got invited to the audition, and then it was pared down to a couple people, and there was a big panel of jurists. I remember David Finkel and Wuhan and Ida Gavafian, Paul Neubauer, Bruce Adolph was there. The cellist or two. It was very nerve wracking.
It's a pretty okay bunch.
Oh yeah, such wonderful people who play there. Yeah, and I played some solo pieces, a piece with piano. I had to play some chamber music, And then in the next round, I had to play with artists from the Chamber Music Society. So I remember playing with David Finkel and Annika Vafian, string trios. I remember playing Schumann piano quartet with I think it was Anne-Marie McDermott and oh no, sorry, it was Wuhan and David and Ani, just so that they could see how I communicated, how I interacted with them, how it felt to play in a group with me, because they would, you know, it would be a mix of sort of older and younger people playing together during the season itself. You know, the regular season artists and the CMS2 people. So they wanted to make sure that we were up for it, and then they kept on expanding their concerts series in New York, and that they started in Menlo, and they partnered I think with Daniel Hope in Mecklenburg. They're playing in Florida. They're playing at Shaker Village at Saratoga Springs. So there are many sort of outreaches, outgrowths, if that's the right word. So they need a really talented pool of a large pool of talented artists. I was very lucky. I'm very lucky to play with those wonderful people, and sort of high pressure concerts too. They were always kind of recorded and streamed and put on the radio when that wasn't so normal. Like that wasn't the usual thing, and now it's usual. Um, they were always worrying about the lighting and the way it would look on the internet. Of course, very important. We did a TV broadcast. I remember live from Lincoln Center. They built a set for it so it would look good on TV, and so they're really ahead of the game, I think, in that respect. And just the amount of music and the amount of concerts there is a huge influence. I used to hear concerts all the time, just be astounded by the level of my colleagues. Very humbling. And also great repertoire. They put together great programs with very standard pieces, but also very interesting works that you don't often hear. Yeah, I'm very lucky.
So what were some of those pieces off the top of your head that like maybe you don't hear as often?
Sort of avoid string quartets in the sense that it wouldn't be an ad hoc string quartet that they would program. They would let a quartet play that, the Orion Quartet, the Emerson Quartet, the Juilliard Quartet, let's say. So it was more so quintets, sextets, trios, works with piano. Oh, I don't know. It's so hard to say. I mean, really, virtually the entire repertoire. They might have a Russian evening where there'd be two very standard pieces on the program. Let's say Rachmaninoff's. Well, I mean, I have to say standard, but known pieces. Rachmaninoff suite for two pianos, and then maybe a Shostakovich piano trio, and then maybe a Balakirev octet with piano or something like this, or it might be a Czech program where you play some Dvorak, maybe the piano quintet or a piano quartet, and then we would do Martinu nonet, something like this. I played a Rolla duo. We played a Nescu octet, Beethoven C major viola quintet. That piece, for some reason, never gets played. I don't understand why. A Spohr double quartet I played there. Played a clarinet quartet by Crucell that was really lovely, I remember. Mendelssohn viola quintets, Brahms viola quintets, Mozart viola quintets, Beethoven string trios. I don't know. You should look at their website. It's an unbelievable sort of accumulation of the chamber music repertoire. They've played it all, basically. What's really funny, though, because I think maybe a year or two ago, I played Mozart B-flat viola quintet, the first one, K174. And they had never played it before. It had never been programmed since 1960. I think the year it was founded, 69 maybe. But otherwise, they play it all. And they're playing new music, too. And I also did a premiere there by Bruce Adolph a year or two ago, very fine cello quintet.
Do you have any particular concerts from CMS or maybe even from Pacifica that particularly stick out to you in memory?
Oh boy, it's so difficult to think about individual concerts. They're all so sort of meaningful in different ways. Well, with Pacifica, I played at Ravinia. That was very exciting to walk out on stage, the same stage I had played on as a student. 10 years, 15 years before, let's say. I forget that was very exciting. Playing in Switzerland, in this beautiful hotel in Lucerne was really nice with the quartet. Same thing with Sarasota. I played there. And I was a student at that festival. That was very exciting to be back as sort of faculty. Playing at the Gardner Museum in Boston. That's a beautiful hall that's sort of cube-shaped. It sort of, square shaped. It goes up.
Oh.
I used to hear concerts there when I was a student, although not in that hall, which was new. I used to hear them in the tapestry room at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. Playing a Beethoven cycle with the quartet, that's such an achievement, such a monument, that music. That was really exciting to play it. So many concerts in the past. I've been so lucky. Playing viola quintets with Kim Kashkashian and Carter Bray and Ani Kavafian and Danny Phillips on Mozart's birthday, I remember. Playing with my heroes sometimes, sitting next to Kim, playing Shostakovich Octet at Caramore, or playing with Pam Frank, or Atara Arad, or Gary Hoffman. I mean, it's just impossible. I could just go on like this for 45 minutes, and I'd miss people whose playing I love and who are really important to me. So lucky. It's such a community of musicians we have in the chamber music community. It's so great. Yeah, I remember playing a birthday concert once for James Wolfenson, who was the president of the World Bank, and I think he was on the board of Carnegie Hall, and we played on stage Carnegie Hall. He rented it out for his birthday in the big hall, and it was Mendelssohn Octet with it was like two on a part, all of his old friends and some students. I was at Curtis at the time, and I just got a call, would you like to do this? And they said, well, it's going to be Pinka Zuckerman and Yo-Yo Ma and Sharon Robinson, Jamie Laredo, on and on and on. Bono was there. We played a piece with him. I recorded with Sting and with all these Broadway stars and famous violinists, and played with great conductors, Kurt Mazur and Lauren Mazel and Raphael Frubeck de Burgo. I mean, again, I could go on for 45 minutes of the great conductors I've played under, how lucky I was and am.
Yeah.
And the great people I played with. I don't know how it happened to me, but Joseph Silverstein. I mean, it's amazing when you start playing with your teachers or people that you idolized when you were a kid, and that they would sort of consent to play with you.
Right. It's always pretty surreal when you play or you meet someone, like a famous person who you've always admired your whole life, and then you're like, oh, I'm like actually talking to them now, and I'm playing with what?
Very exciting when you sort of just see that someone is so much better than you are.
Right.
It's very humbling, but very exciting that you realize that you're in their company is amazing, but also that you have a lot to learn. I remember at Tanglewood, the first night that we had a rehearsal with Seiji Ozawa, like the conductor, he came in and just immediately everyone just, I don't know, something was, we were all very excited, and we all sort of rotated seating for each concert, and I was in the very back for that one. I remember Egmont Overture, and I just remember him looking. You had the impression that he had everyone in his eyes. He could, even me back there, if I were a little off, I had the impression that he would know. It was very, very interesting.
Have you read the book by Haruki Murakami, The Conversations with Seiji Ozawa?
No, I've seen it. I've not read it.
It's beautiful. You should check it out.
Sure.
I don't know if you've read much Haruki Murakami, but
just the Wind Up Bird Chronicles.
Yeah. Well, it's crazy to me how much attention and detail that Haruki Murakami can talk about classical music.
He's a music lover, yeah, right.
But he's never formally studied music. He just always relates music to writing, and that appears in the book a lot, how music and writing are related.
Interesting. Yeah, he's a very interesting writer. It's funny that, someone like Seiji Ozawa should come up. I haven't thought about him in a very long time. But yet there's so many people just like him that played a small part in my, musical development. So it's very interesting to be reminded of these things, these pieces and these players.
Who would you say are your primary musical influences?
Well, I would say that I have so many, and I think you do too, and you will. You sort of accumulate them. The thing that I really think about is when you play for someone in a master class. Let's say you have a half an hour perhaps with them. If you walk away with one thing that's important that you take with you, I think that's a huge success. And I remember doing this with every person I've sort of worked with, and some, many more things than that. But, early on, chamber musical influences. The person I ended up studying with after I went to BU, Michael Tree, and the Guarneri Quartet, I just happened to buy those CDs, a lot of them with Arthur Rubinstein, the pianist, and I just was transfixed by the sound and the passion they played with. And I wanted that sound, that sort of connection, that emotional connection. He was a really early influence. Before studying with Michael, I studied with Michelle Lacourse, and she was a big influence on me too. Very dedicated and caring teacher. weekly studio classes, um, a knowledge of the repertoire and of the body and the instrument. She had worked a lot with Karen Tuttle for her undergrad, her grad, her artist diploma. And so when I finally got to play for Karen a couple years after that, I really felt like I had been immersed in that sort of school of teaching. Um, so Michelle was a big influence in her. She used her words really to describe and to teach you, how to hold the bow, how to breathe, how to play this sort of thing. Michael Tree at Curtis was he demonstrated. He told stories. He inspired you. He played a lot for you. He perhaps was a great coach in that way. I think I like that I came to him after I had studied with Michelle, and not the reverse order, because Michael, I think, you'd be a certain kind of student to do well with him, because you could take more from him. I think if you'd already sort of sorted out other things in your technique, let's say. Not to say that he didn't have lots of great things to say about technique. I don't have a bad word to say about Michael or Michelle, for that matter. Kim Kashkashian was a huge influence, I think, of lots of violists of my generation. This is before YouTube, before Spotify and everything. You had to go to a record store and buy a record, and she had she has had quite a career of playing big viola concerti and chamber music and solo music, and so she was recording things, and they would come out, and we'd have this great new recording of the Brahms sonatas or Schumann Märchenbilder or Kortag or things like this. It was very exciting because I was a student in Boston when she left Germany and came to the States to teach at NEC. It was probably around 2000, I guess, and it was very exciting. At Tanglewood, I remember she gave a concert kind of near Tanglewood. Yeah, so Kim is a huge influence. So is Steve Ansell. I mentioned him before. He is the violist of the Muir Quartet, and after years of that, he joined the Boston Symphony as its principal. It's sort of late '90s, I guess, mid '90s. And I heard him play at Tanglewood, and I loved his sound. Just so sort of warm and a tenor viola sound, and beautiful vibrato and legato. And I always sort of have his sound in my ear. And he was my chamber music coach for 4 years. And I'm very grateful for the contact I had with him. The masterclass people I got to play for: Martha Katz from the Cleveland Quartet, Kim Kashkashian a couple times, and then we started playing together sometimes. That was nice. James Dunham, I remember Jesse Levine. Then violinists and recordings, I started to really get into those. I would listen to them for fun, and also to really listen and to sort of learn from. So many great violinists. I mentioned Joseph Silverstein, Heifetz and Francescatti, and Michael Rabin and David Oistrakh, and did I mention Jacques Thibault? So many amazing violinists, and then they really played with individual different character. They say you could turn on the radio and just halfway through a piece, and you would immediately know that it was Joseph Szigeti or Heifetz or Michael Mann or Menuhin. That they all had their individual sounds and styles and techniques, and now perhaps they're getting a little closer together because we hear each other all the time on YouTube and on broadcasts and recordings. And then there was a real difference. They were inspiring to me. Other violinists that my teachers spoke a lot about. I feel very lucky. I studied with young teachers, but also some very old teachers who had studied with old people before. Primrose was a huge influence, and my teachers studied with him and heard him play. Maybe if not, they were like if he wasn't their only teacher. Karen Tuttle worked with him and sort of figured him out. She said that he was so natural on the viola. He couldn't necessarily teach her well how to play, and that she would sort of poke and prod his muscles and see what's contracting and what's expanding and what's tense. Nothing should be tense, perhaps, to sort of figure out how to teach. And his sound, and this is the era when there were no edits and just play through something once, and that was it. The fact that it holds up and is such strong, rich viola playing. He was such a natural. He used the entire bow, yet had really no accents. Oistrakh was the same way. Just the entire bow was his palette. Whereas I feel like if I did that, I'd be making all kinds of accents and then arm weight as opposed to pressing into the string, and an unbelievably strong sound at the tip. Of course, he had fabulous instruments. that helps too. But his technique was just, and of course he had this unbelievably long left pinky. I suppose right too. If you go to BYU in Provo, there's a Japanese sort of ink handprint of his hand on the wall there, and I have a picture of it. His pinky kind of comes up to his fourth finger like that.
Wow.
My pinky is sort of normal. It looks short right now. His was incredibly long. That made for an incredibly good hand for the viola, for octaves. I'm sure he did fingered octaves, and also just to have a balance on the fourth finger that's where you're not reaching, but yet it has such weight to it and flesh. He was sort of built to play the viola. Violinists, my teachers used to always speak about, their chamber coaches. Sasha Schneider from the Budapest Quartet. So many of my mentors spoke about him, that he just lived and breathed music, chamber music in particular. Lived every day as if it was, as if it were the last day. Founded projects with kids playing in orchestra. He's the one who founded NYSOS, New York String Orchestra Seminar, with Frank Solomon. And if he had an idea, like he wanted to play all the Handel violin sonatas in Washington Square Park for free, he would just do it. This sort of passion for music, I think he really instilled in his students. I never got to meet him, unfortunately. Felix Gallimere was another person that I remember people like Ida Levin would always talk about. All the people in Marlborough would talk about Felix Gallimere, who was in the Gallimere Quartet, but who also premiered. He worked with Ravel and with all the great composers of that time before he left and came to the States, and then he taught at Curtis for years and was at Marlborough, and so that's a huge influence in this sense that all of my teachers worked with him. And then just listening to recordings, I suppose I don't listen as much anymore. When I was a kid, I used to listen to tons of recordings, not to copy per se, but just to get inspiration. Leonard Rose and Rostropovich and string quartets, Guarneri Quartet, the Cleveland Quartet, so wonderful. The Bush Quartet, even older than this, the Hungarian Quartet. Sándor Vég had a quartet, the Vég Quartet. I feel like no one talks about Sándor Vég or Adolf Busch, two stellar violinists. Tokyo Quartet, the Primrose Quartet I mentioned. The Hollywood Quartet is another wonderful quartet. I also really like Quattro Mosaic, sort of period quartet. Gorgeous Beethoven, just and earlier things too, Haydn. I really enjoy their playing. Lucky Budelli, this group founded by Honor Bilsma, the cellist, who played with his wife, Vera Betts. They recorded a whole bunch of things. I love his playing. I love the freedom and the originality and the invention in his playing. And I listen to jazz, kind of old jazz, for the same reason. I love Oscar Peterson, for example, the imagination in his playing, complete technical mastery of the piano, complete mastery of the instrument, could do whatever he wanted to. That seems like a dream to me. Same with Sarah Vaughan. Shadings, the colors, she had the freedom in her singing. I mean, it's just endless how many unbelievable artists there are. And it's so nice that they do what they do and we do what we do. Take inspiration from them. It's without trying to copy someone's timing or sound or interpretation. It's just kind of nourishment, Yeah.
What is your advice for students who are preparing for college and grad school auditions?
Well, my advice in general is slow practice. Pam Frank said something to me once that always really stuck. This is what I'm talking about. You take one thing. I mean, I took many, many, many things from Pam, but if you take just one thing from someone, it makes you who you are. And I remember Pam, and I think of Pam, who was a fantastic coach, teacher, violinist, saying that we practice to make ourselves feel better. We just play through things and la la la. Isn't life nice? As opposed to, as soon as it sounds good, get out of it and go right to the thing that sounds bad and practice that slowly. Figure that out, as opposed to running through entire movements. So I would say that because when you're taking an audition, there's a lot of repertoire you have to prepare. It might be very different styles, and so you have to sort of focus yourself. So I would say to, just in general, that's not necessarily preparing for an audition, but zero in on the things that really need the work, as opposed to just running through things. But the big advice I'd say about auditioning for a school or any audition is to perform and play with character and presence and passion, and don't worry, don't think clinically about being perfect because it's an audition and they're going to want you to be perfect when you're practicing. I mean, think about the technical things when you're practicing, when you're working it out, when you're figuring it out, when you're learning it. When you're performing, when you're ready to play it, let that go. we want to be moved. We want to hear a musician. We could always suggest a different vibrato approach, or we can help you with your bow, or give you exercises for this or for that, Sevchek or Stradiak or whatever it is. But the thing that you can't teach, the internal sort of passion for music and storytelling ability, that's what we're listening for. Of course, we want to hear things in tune. We want to hear legato and not portato when you don't mean it. But I also want to know that there's something in there that's worth listening to, that I want to hear. I want you to share with me. That's what's exciting about hearing auditions.
Fun facts?
Yeah. Favorite viola works by a living composer?
Oh, by living composer. Wow, that's really interesting. Well, someone just played some Garth Knox for an audition. I thought it was really fantastic. That's really interesting, fun music. I remember Kim was quite fond of Garth and his music making and his viola playing. Kortag, I'm also a big fan of Science Games Messages. Kim has a great recording of those. I find that really interesting. Brett Dean has some really great viola music. I don't know if you know. There's this Australian violist who was in the Berlin Philharmonic and left to focus on composition. I just heard 2 Rhapsodies by Jessie Montgomery.
Yeah.
There are arrangements from the violin ones that I thought were really terrific, and I want to get the music and check those out. I have a friend in England named Sally Beamish. She's a terrific composer and a friend of mine, and she's also a violist, so she's written solo pieces and concerti for viola. So violists often write music for their own instrument, right? Hindemith likes like that. Jennifer Higdon has a sonata that I heard when I was in Philly. I thought was quite a beautiful piece. Jessica Meyer is a violist in New York I played a lot with. She's written a lot for viola and played her own music. David Leisner is a guitarist and a composer and a teacher in New York, and he wrote a viola piece called Vapors. It was just published. One of the movements is dedicated to Xinyun Huang, and one of them is dedicated to me. I think that's a really good piece. It's very colorful and from the heart, also based on his impressions looking at a piece of art. I think that's a really strong piece too. There's so much. So those are the ones that come to mind kind of right away. I really feel like I'm leaving out so many. I'd encourage you to check out the American Viola Society's website. There is a database there. It's like music by underrepresented composers. So super important and useful. And I myself have a lot of learning to do. And that's a really good resource. So if you go to the AVS, look for this, or if you Google, you can find it. And you can look by instrumentation: viola solo, viola with piano, viola and chamber music. And so there's a lot of great music being written there, being written today. That's there. I think that's super useful.
Any pets? Do you have any pets?
I don't have any pets, no. I love pets, and I think I like animals more. I love animals more and more as I get older. But the travel schedule and things like this, it wouldn't be right. Not now.
Would you get like a dog or something if you could? Or what kind of pet?
Yeah, it could be a dog or a cat. I sort of love them both. I know how could you be one? You have to be one or the other, right? I had a cat when I was growing up, my first pet. I never had a dog, but I have a lot of friends with dogs, and I love them. So there.
I'm a big dog person, but I do like both as well.
Do you have favorite types of cuisine?
I love Italian food. I love French food. I love sort of farmhouse. You think roast chicken, things like this. I love that kind of food. I love Indian food. I love Thai food. I'm allergic to sesame, so I have to be a little careful with Korean. Well, very careful with Korean food, and a little careful with Chinese food.
That hurts my heart. That you're allergic.
No, not my whole life. Just since I was about 18. Just happened one day. So no hummus for me if it has tahini in it.
For sure.
I think I'm gonna ask the big contentious debate now. So, when playing viola, do you lift your fingers?
Or do you leave them down, your left fingers?
My instinct is to go away from tension and things like this. So I'm going to say fingers up. Now, that being said, I think when you have fingers like shooting out in every direction and reaching, I don't think that's good. Yeah. Mr. Tree used to talk about how he learned from Zimbalist that your hand should look like you could put a teacup over it. I remember him saying that you should be able to sort of put a inverted teacup over it, that nothing is sort of out of shape. And so it's Michael used to always use a lot of sort of half position and third and fourth fingers instead of reaching for something or sliding, 2, 2, 2, 2, 3, 3, 3, he would 2, 3, 4 as opposed to 2, 2, 3, let's say. Because why not use your fourth finger? It's right there. So in that sense, I would say to keep your fingers close to the string. Because you don't want to be sort of aiming and messing around like this. But Michelle would always talk about sort of ploppy fingers, meaning that they go up and down with energy. Now, perhaps not in something very slow and lyrical. You wouldn't want to have fast articulation; that'll disturb the line. But that fingers are released with energy also, and also that they're kind of refreshed, so that there's not tension, but that you're not sort of holding like this. I think that's. So I think it's a bit of both, to be honest. I don't like the idea of sort of tensely keeping your fingers there. But also you want to make sure that you're not just sort of shooting them out all the time, randomly. If I had to choose, I guess I'd say, fingers up. I don't know. Is that right? Does that sound good to you?
Oh yeah, you don't have to choose like one or the other. We usually come up with both as well when we've talked about it.
Yeah. I mean, I remember just learning a lot from Karen and from Michelle about tension and about releasing the tension. So not turning your head to the left, because then you see it makes this muscle really tense. Not not hiking your shoulder up, but having it loose and flexible. Whether or not you use a shoulder rest, that you balance it on your collarbone, and that the viola is free, even if you use a shoulder rest, as I do, and that you can sort of catch and release with your hand and your collarbone when you're shifting.
All right, I guess we should. Oh wait, actually, coffee or tea? Very important.
Coffee in the morning for sure. Tea sometimes in the afternoon.
Yes, I agree.
Pretty good answer.
Thank you so much again.
Well, boy, this is fun. I feel like I had so many more things I could. Well, I'm already talking so much, but yeah. Thanks for your questions, your interest. Nice to talk with you.